to the LitChix podcast. We are Mary Ellen Humphrey. I am Susan Landrigan, and we're coming to you from the Innovation Studio at Lakeshore Center for the Arts in Westfield, New York. Today we're going to discuss how reading is essential for writing.
You know, this is something that 30 years ago, gosh, I must be getting old, about maybe longer than that, in the early 90s when I decided I was going to write a book, right? I said, my kids are gone and empty nest. I always wanted to write. I wrote in high school and then I got busy raising a family and didn't write. And so I decided to write a book. And I had no clue how to do that. I had read a lot of books and it looks easy, right? When you read something, you think, oh, that's not so hard. But I discovered when I sat down to actually write this book, and I forced myself to write 200 pages. I said, that'll be a book, 200 pages. And I got done, and it was just 200 pages. But there wasn't really a story. There wasn't an opening. There wasn't a plot line. There wasn't even well-developed characters. It was just this craziness. And so I decided to figure out, how do I do this? I went to this breakfast thing. It was in Concord, New Hampshire, and there was a playwright there. I've forgotten his name now, but he had won a Pulitzer Prize for his play many years ago, and he was the speaker. And I sat there with my friends, and every word he said just was perfect. And I thought, wow, he is a real, true wordsmith. So I went up to him afterwards in the front, and I said, I have a question. What is your advice to someone who's just starting out, who's just decided, I want to be a writer? And he was writing plays, of course. So he said, here's what I did. He said, I went to the library and I started with A through Z and I read every single play, every single one. Then I sat down and I wrote. So he said, read, and then write. And that is really excellent advice. What I learned from this is that after you become a writer, when you read something, you don't read it the same way. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you start reading a book now, you got kind of this dual track. You've got the storyline, but then how did they do this?
How did they go about making... Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
I have, yes.
Yeah. At first it was a little disconcerting because I thought, well, I'm not enjoying the book as much as I would have if I didn't know that there was a structure and a format. And but then after a while you kind of get used to it. It's still
enjoyable.
It is. What happens now is when I read something that I notice the technique or the style of the writer or the use of the words, now I have a great deal of respect for that talent and that ability, and I enjoy. It's like looking at art when you see someone who's a really good artist or a musician who plays wonderful music, and you can kind of appreciate that more because now you have a sense of what it takes to get there. You know,
all the work.
We don't think about it, but writing is an art. It is an art, and just like you can learn from musicians, you can learn from artists, you can learn from sculptors, whoever it is. You learn from the best by observing what they do.
Yeah, and when you're reading as a writer, you pick up things along the way.
It changes how you read, but it's really important to read. And I feel now, I'm older.
We both are.
I have books on my stand that I want to read, and I want to read good books. And well-written books. I don't mean that books aren't good, but well-written.
Right, yeah.
To see what the craft is. So if you look at some of the really highly acclaimed, prize-winning novelists and whatnot, you can see that they have really mastered the craft. But don't forget, they also have editors. They also have teams behind them. When you have a commercially published book, generally, there's a whole lot of people making that into the final polished gem that it is. But still, the writer has to write that story. And so now I kind of kick myself because I don't read as much as I should. When I first started out, I was like, that's great. And I started reading all these books, and I started noticing, well, this person starts, first sentence is this eye-catching, ear-catching action. This writer starts with, oh, isn't that sweet and nice, and I like that. And you begin to understand, too, what appeals to you as a reader. So when you think about writing, I don't personally think about who's the reader, but if you're looking especially to be a commercially published author, you kind of got to think about who your audience is. And if you're reading a certain genre, whether it's mystery or sci-fi or whatever, there's kind of their own specific style and rules. And so you have to think about that reader. And if you want to do that, you got to read the latest books or the highly acclaimed books in that genre. And you'll really get a head start in your own writing. And then, of course, there's the openings. Those are obvious. But then how do they build the plot? Do they tell you a lot, or do they make it mysterious? Do they, have clues you find later and go, oh, yeah, aha, And seeing how that's done is really helpful. It's really instructive as a writer.
Well, I'm working on a memoir right now, and I like to read memoirs.
Yeah.
I like to hear about, especially famous people, how they struggled. It didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
And everybody has struggles, and it's kind of nice to hear that we're all in the same boat.
Yes.
And so that, I think, has helped me. Some were well written, some were not.
Yeah. But sometimes with a memoir, I think the story is really the most important essence. It should be well written. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but the story is what really captures you. I think memoirs are wonderful. I love memoirs. And there's always a memoir. If you look on the best-selling list of whatever the books are, there's usually a memoir in there, or more than one. And sometimes famous people, of course, everybody wants to know what the famous person did. But some of the best memoirs are not famous people. They're regular people who had extraordinary experiences or survived against the odds or whatever it is that they did. In my case, hiked a mountain 1,000 times to get to the top. So, yeah.
There is one chapter that I'm sort of struggling with, and I think it's because there's a lot of conflict in it. But that's what people really want.
Yeah.
It's what makes a book good. So I'm really struggling with it, though, because
Yeah.
I don't know.
Conflict is sort of, I hate to say it, but it does make life interesting. Sometimes we wish it wouldn't, but it's what you remember.
Yeah.
Especially how it resolves in the end, because most of the time we can't see the ending. In real life, we're like, oh, hanging on to get through, but then afterwards, in retrospect, we see things differently.
Yes.
Yeah. So are you just going back from memory to write your memoir, or do you have journals or anything that helps
I have
you?
no journals. No, I've never done that in the past.
Okay.
But I just want to remember things before they're gone.
Yes.
Gone from my brain.
Gone, yes.
Because
Yeah.
those.
Well, I think especially memoirs, it's nice because you think about, like I have grandchildren that are growing up now, and they're going to get married and they'll be great-grandchildren. I might not see them all, but they'll be generations from now. I think it's fascinating to read what my ancestors did. You know, I have an ancestor, Mercy Otis Warren, who lived during the Revolutionary War. She wrote the first history of the American Revolution. It was published in 1805, and to her name, Mrs. Warren. And of course, back then, people didn't think women could write. You know, in fact, a lot of times girls weren't even taught to write. They only needed to be able to add up how many eggs were in a recipe or whatever. They didn't, they didn't need that skill. That was a manly skill. So,
Cooking is math. Yeah.
yeah. So, well, back then.
Well, and you need to read the recipe too.
Yeah. And the idea of politics in women was really taboo back then.
Yes.
But she was a fascinating woman. And so when I read what she wrote, I hear her voice. I feel like I'm in communication with this ancestor. So I think that's just fascinating. And she wrote in her preamble to the Revolutionary War books that she wrote that she was speaking to posterity. Well, I'm that. I'm her posterity. Sounds weird, but that's who I am. And she wanted us to know what she viewed and how she felt about the American Revolution and the formation of our government, which is just, to me, that's fascinating. And her friendship with John Adams and Abigail Adams, and
Wow.
and how she actually influenced the addition of the Bill of Rights
Mm-hmm.
to the Constitution. She was a very well-educated and very intelligent woman.
Mm-hmm.
But she was also influenced by her time. And so when you're writing a memoir, like we write our memoirs, who's to say 200 years from now what the culture will be like? We'll be
Right.
foreign to them.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, in
Because
many
things are always
respects.
changing.
Yeah, and norms change, cultures change. We, you know, we haven't yet seen a female president. We have women that are governors now, which was, when I was a young child, that wasn't the case.
Right.
We have women who attend military academies now, which we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, that wasn't an option for me, but my daughter could go.
Mm-hmm.
And so things change and norms change. And when I look at what her norms were, and you remember the famous line from Abigail was, "Remember the ladies." She's telling her husband John in the construction of the Constitution, "Remember the women. We're equal too." But he wasn't quite able to go to that step, or wasn't willing, or whatever. But Mercy wasn't saying that. She was quiet on that subject. The only thing she said was, "I have 5 sons and a husband, and since women are so dependent on the men, whether it's the son or the husband, because women didn't own property, women couldn't vote, women didn't have power, they were
Right.
dependent on the males." Wasn't that long ago. She said, "Therefore we have an interest in what happens in politics." But she didn't go to the point of we should be participating, we should be voting, we should be. So I got a
Because
little
we
bit,
weren't there
I
yet.
got a little off track here, but this is
Yeah.
this is part of reading what people have written. In this case, historical, but in fiction writers, we're reading novels, you know, and every writer has their own style, their own way of doing it. So I encourage people who want to write to, as this man said, read, 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 and then write, write, write.
So especially the genre that you're writing in.
Yes,
Because,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So hopefully that's helpful.
So we have a word for the day. The word for the day is collaborate. To work with another person or group to do or achieve something.
Boy, we do that a lot.
We do.
We do. We do it in our writers
In
group.
our writers group.
We actually have some people now who are writing articles, and they bring them in, and we really proof them and give them suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Improves the quality that comes out of our writers group, as well as our books
Mm-hmm.
and our stories. So yeah, collaborate is, I think, really a crucial word for writers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, there's a couple of things I want to mention.
Mhm.
We have a writing contest going on. Lakeshore Center for the Arts is sponsoring the 2nd annual writing contest, and it's going to be closing in September. So you still have plenty of time, but go to the website and click on the writing contest. Send us your short story, your personal essay, your poem, whatever it is that your favorite piece. Send it to us because we want to read it, and we will once again be awarding a prize for each first and second and third place, as well as creating our anthology collection. So that's number 1. And number 2, we're really excited to announce the first annual Western New York Writers Conference. That's going to be held here at Lakeshore Center for the Arts on October 11th. We're going to have a cast of speakers from publisher, agent, editor. We've got a nonfiction writer, a fiction writer, and it's going to be sharing, collaborating. Bring your work, bring your books, and come and join this wonderful Western New York writing community. So that more information will be coming out on that shortly. So just mark your calendar.
Yeah. And we're going to go collaborate tomorrow at the writers group.
Yes. Yep.
Um,
Working on a memoir. In your case, working on a fictional story. I'm doing my Keepers book, which I will get into another time, but it stalls every time I start working on it, so that's maybe something we can talk about in the future, is how do you get through that middle part of your book?
yeah. When you get stuck.
Yeah, when it's all kind of mumble-jumbling around.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today. We value your feedback, and we'll see you next week.
Happy writing!